Welcome to the podcast, Neeta. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh my gosh, Melody, it's such a pleasure. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure. I'm like so excited. So I did like a deep dive into the world of you and everything that you're up to. And like the first thing that I have to ask you is, woman, how do you do it all? Like,
Uh,
really? You have two little kids. How old are they?
my son he just turned 4 and my daughter is about a year and a half. She's 16 months.
God
Yeah.
bless.
I,
Any
yes,
like
it's
tips
been,
and tools to share with us?
oh my goodness. So it has been, I think when I had my daughter, I had this kind of, second awakening. And for me, well, in my husband is from India, and so he constantly was saying, the daughters bring Lakshmi, and Lakshmi means like abundance, the goddess of abundance. And so I didn't really, like I'm half Indian. I didn't really I'm like, okay, sure. But when she came into the world, it was like, oh, okay, I got this, this book deal literally in the hospital. I
Wow.
literally had just given birth to her. And then some of these other things happened where, we started another business. And I think that at least for me, in my experience, there was this shift that I wanted to, be that way that my mom was for myself. And I didn't really understand it when I was younger, but I wanted to just, I wanted to step into and share my dharma, share my voice, share my truth. And really that came into this creative uh portal when I was pregnant with my daughter, even though we had moved and there's so many challenges. We were living in LA at the time. And yet there was kind of this like new light that invigorated this sense of, okay, this is this next chapter. And I think it's going to be great. And honestly, I mean, the book was written with ease. And I mean, yes, I wasn't sleeping, newborn woes, all of the things. But I think, I don't try to do it all. And I think that's the biggest secret. I've asked for help, number of times. I've even, tried to corral in my new neighborhood. We've been living here now in Austin, Texas for like 2 years. But gathering the mamas, because that is like the secret society of hidden help, and thank God for the Facebook groups because I'm like, "Oh, okay," and I think operating our lives in that way, it's like, "Oh, they can watch the kids for a little bit. Cool. We have support today. Bring your kids here if you need." So I am like the first one to be like, "All right, community, let's go." And because to make everyone's dreams come true, and I know that sounds so cliche, but if you have something that you're like so passionate about or so excited about, or for some listening, you're like, that wasn't my experience. I actually wanted to nestle down and go inward with my kid, and that's totally cool. But I think that regardless of which way, I think there is a way to ask for help. And I don't think I did that in my 20s. I don't think I did that nearly enough in my 30s or in my early 30s. And I think that it's just been a graceful with all of the complexity of emotions. Yeah, but to ask. So that's the through line, I think.
I love that so much. There's so much you said that I want to unpack. I mean, I so appreciate you giving that permission, like for us, like to not have to do it all, right? Because when someone might look at you from the outside and you're a published author, I think like you're a four-time published author, right? And you're doing all of these incredible things. You've got two young kids, a marriage, a partner, like so much to maintain and support. And a look from the outside in would tell us that you've totally got it all together. And you do, don't get me wrong, you totally do. But to also be like, you really don't have to do it all and you don't have to do it at the same time. And my guess is you didn't do it all at once, right? Like there were phases.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, I think that in this highlight reel world that we live in, so many times we get so caught up in, everyone's dream story again, right? People are just showing these highlight reels, and I think for me, as a speaker, as a serial entrepreneur, even in our communities, what has been so important is to share. You can hear my kids screaming downstairs.
Keeping it real. I love it.
But you can realize the idea that there are different phases. There is the shit show behind what you're seeing behind the highlight reel. The imposter syndrome, the fact that just maybe I shared this in a talk the other day that, my first time pitching myself as a leadership coach years, after I sold my dental business, I thought I completely bombed and failed because my slides weren't working. And so I think that we are the biggest critics of ourselves. And I think that's one. And two, most of us, it's not going to happen overnight. It shouldn't. But what will happen is that compound effect. So, if you're wanting to try something new, or if you're wanting to venture out, the kids they've got their footing together, they're doing whatever they're doing, and now it gives you a little bit more time, go and pursue that thing and treat it like, okay, this is going to be my gig, my hobby, most of us want to get to our destination overnight. And what I love to share is it's a marathon, especially if we're talking about your purpose or your passion, or in one of the companies that I founded, we talk about dharma, which is your soul's purpose. And you don't really get there just by saying, all right, I'm going to go all in, tomorrow, and I got to get there yesterday. Because that hustle, the Gary V, that whole ideal for men, yeah, it's cute, but it leads to burnout.
Yeah.
And I think in this stage of life, it's all about appreciating the people that bring you, love and joy, and also that you're like, okay, doing something that you love, and you can hang out with your girlfriends on the weekend, and you can spend time with your family here and there. There will have to be some sacrifices, of course. And I just think that boundaries have been a thing, because I know that, in my 20s, I worked myself to the bone, and it was doing it for the wrong reasons. I was doing it for validation. I was doing it to belong. I was doing it as a coping mechanism because I had, undergone a tremendous loss, and that was my way of keeping my head above water. And I think that now looking back and having those reflections, I'm like, some of the things I loved about my parents, and I don't want to repeat that because that's what got them sick. Right. And so you have that reality check when you're like, okay, at what cost am I going to write my book? I'm not going to do 18-hour days, but it might take me longer, which it did, and I did have the right support around me, which was amazing. Leaned on people for support, asked, etc. And yeah, it took me a little bit longer, but that's okay. Did I have fun in the process? Sure. Did I learn a ton about me and what I liked and what I didn't like about it? Absolutely. And I think that's, isn't that the main goal? I think so much we attach the wrong, value system or belief as to why we should be doing things. But if we tune into the way that we're supposed to, how do you want to feel after you do that thing? Accomplished, brave, courageous, loved, joyful, fulfilled, versus what most of us in our psychology, connect to, which is, okay, have to prove somebody wrong. Somebody said, and those are great motivators in the beginning, but is that sustainable? Right. Yeah. So
Oh yeah, so much, so much. I love that you said, yeah, like the whole Gary V culture, it's cute, but it's like that hustle mentality that perhaps our parents passed on to us. I know that happened for me too. Like I always felt if I was taking a break or if I wasn't working one day, and this was like in my late teens, like my dad had us working, and I so appreciate so many parts of it because it made me the female entrepreneur that I am. But I had made more money in my business when I was on vacation than I did on the week when I was hustling. Like that was like a recent
Yes.
realization for me that, you know what, when you can actually release, when you can actually like do things that serve your soul, you might actually be like unleashing a new level of abundance. And that's been proven to me over and over again. So when we know better, we do better. We thank our parents for everything that they taught us, and we release the pieces that no longer serve us. So I so appreciate you saying that. So good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's perspective too, right? I think we get into, and there's a concept that I talk about in the book called fly forward. It's a framework and there's 5 stages. And many times we get into something because either we're inspired or we had like a life awakening moment. I think that my trajectory was inspired because I got into my lowest of low, which was having to leave my toxic marriage, my first marriage. And that really spun this like whole healing journey of realizing the perspective that I hadn't reconciled all of the emotions of my grief and my loss of my mom, my dad, and my brother that happened so early on in my life, that I was like channeling that into this like overworking, overcompensating because I didn't want anybody to judge me from the outside. I didn't want anybody to think I was broken, but honestly, I was, and
Right.
that's okay. Yet I tried to prove. So one can say, well, Neeta, damn, that really worked well for you. It sure did, to a point. Because then,
Mm.
even at the height of my dental career, I had my practice. It was, 7 figures, all the things. I was not even 30. I did not know who I was. And I was a chameleon. I was like, yes, yes, ma'am. You want me to do this? Okay. You want me to be like this? Absolutely. And so I attracted a lot of people who worked for me who didn't have integrity, you know, cheating and lying and all of the things, right? But I needed to grasp onto that so I can see, well, how am I going to now walk into my 30s? And what does this business mean? Well, for me, it meant, okay, I need to connect all of the dots, work on the healing, work on where I still felt insecure in so many ways. And that's sometimes the reasons why we do things, right? The overcompensation, the overworking, et cetera, to gain that validation. But I was needing the validation for myself.
Right.
And so if somebody's listening to this and does not know why they're doing something, or perhaps maybe there's a perspective shift. And in the 5 stages of the framework, that first stage is okay, you have a fall. Like for myself, it was, that divorce, but a fall could mean, a life sentence, a death sentence, somebody dying, losing something, losing a ton of money, getting fired from your job, getting betrayed, etc. And then you move into this ignition of like, all right, what are you going to do? That's stage 2. Ignition is like, all right, there's a fire under your butt. Like, let's
Mm.
go. Like, do
Mhm.
you want to stay in this crappy job or do you want to leave? Are you going to allow that person to talk to you that way? Or are you going to have a conversation? And then we get into that rising stage where you're still kind of like uncertain. You don't know how this new gig or new thing is going to pan out. You don't know if the guys that you're dating or the people that you're dating are going to hurt you again, but you're open, but you're cautious, right? And then we get into phase 4, stage 4, which is, the magnifying stage, which is, all right, you're blossoming into this brand new era of your life and you're finally making peace with it. You're forgiving yourself for what didn't happen, what
Mm.
happened,
Right.
and there's this acceptance and there's this way and this peace, even though there might still be chaos running around. This is not a linear path. Yet, and then we get into the thriving stage, which is stage 5. And that stage 5 is all about thriving, and thriving meaning, like you starting a podcast, sharing it with other people, joining that group, going to that retreat, going to that conference. You might still be nervous. You might still be like, what am I doing? I have no idea. But you're actually taking action, and you're doing it to pay it forward for somebody else. So,
Wow, I love that. Saying yes to yourself, and in saying yes to yourself, serving others. And this framework is from this amazing book that you've just written, your 4th book. That Sucked. Now What? I love the name. So good.
yes, for any mom out there, you already get it. I mean, for any female out there, I mean, because I think it's hard, and it's messy, and it's magical, and my subtitle is how to embrace the joy and chaos and find magic in the mess,
Mm,
really. And that's
love
that's kind of the through line of, can we be okay with the mess and find the magic through it, right? And there's so many aspects of joy along the way. And anyone who's ever built something before will probably tell you the highlight reels, but hopefully they'll tell you like what didn't go well. And in the book, I chronicle so many of the founders that I used to coach, of, even of course my stories. I have, it goes through a lot of different phases, but I think the idea is, we don't learn about emotional management just, I don't know about you, but like growing up, my mom and dad would always say, well, big girls don't cry. And so I grew up thinking, okay, I'm going to button up my emotions, so much so that even when I went through those horrific losses, I didn't really, I mean, it was painful, it was awful, it was so many things, but I didn't really have the tools to grieve. My grieving, like I said, coping mechanism was toxic positivity. I needed to, I'm like, yep, silver lining, they're okay, they're watching over me. I mean, it was like as if I just buried it all, put it in a closet, locked the closet up, and I'm like, no one's ever gonna find out until, I mean, it started to show up in other ways, like the people I was dating, and it ended up me being in a very toxic relationship. Thank God for that, because pain is an indicator. Pain is an indicator, just like our sometimes, not so joyful emotions like anger, sadness, frustration, jealousy. Those are indicators of, okay, what do I need to heal about myself? What do I need to heal in this relationship right now? Why am I getting triggered again? Like, what is that thing? So feeling that pain or that discomfort of our emotions that we want to suppress, that's our indication that we should pause and say, all right, what part of me is still not healed, and what part of me still needs that? And it's so easy for us to see it with our kids.
Right.
Eh, my 2-year-old, when I started writing the book, he had no filter. He was never told any of those emotions were bad. It was up to me to say, Ari, stop crying. Ari, we don't do that here, and I had to then reshift and really repattern myself in real time, not theoretically, that you read a book and you're like, okay, I had a living being that was like, I mean, just meltdown after meltdown. Anybody who's ever had a 2-year-old, or has spent time with 2-year-olds, you'll know they go through, they don't have emotional regulation. Nothing is formed. And so we're putting these patterns in their minds, but you can see it takes 30 seconds sometimes to go from wailing, screaming, bawling their eyes out, crying, I want this toy, I want this toy, I want that candy, to then a minute or two later, because they've fully let it go and they've processed it, they felt it, they've
Yes.
acknowledged it. Now I've given him language for it. Now he says, Mama, I'm feeling mad. And literally he says it all the time now. He just turned 4.
Oh,
And so to have that emotional acumen so young, and that's one of the practices I talk about in the book. It's a full emotional release practice. And I talk about some of the emotions that a lot of us as females, we probably aren't okay with. We're probably not okay with rage. If you were told, oh, you shouldn't get mad at that, you should, you know, you, girls should be just poised and no anger. But then we feel all of this anger and rage, and guess what? It turns us into raging bitches,
Yes.
and so resentful. And so, your rage is just as important as your joy, as your appreciation, because it allows us to transmute or alchemize or transform those emotions that have been kind of stuck or suppressed so that you can finally release it. And sometimes all you need is to just say it out loud. Like, I
Mm.
am feeling so frustrated with you today.
Wow.
And that's it. That's like that honesty and that vulnerability that I think is just so important for building any relationship. And this too in the workforce, this too if you have a team, this too of course in your most personal relationships, like your love relationships and your friendships, family. I think those are, the so important. So I share a way forward and how to really attune to a lot of these emotions that we feel when we're going day to day.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, the first thing I have to applaud you on is that you are raising your children with emotional intelligence. What we always say at GiRLiFE is like, emotional intelligence is just not taught in school. EQ is not on their priority list. And so you facilitating that for your kids, letting them know that all feelings are valid is so damn important, right? Because like you said it, you like nailed, like it's the fact that we are not taught to express our emotions. Um, Stop crying. Big girls don't cry, right? Like keep it in, like man up, woman up, whatever it is. Like the messages that we give to young kids. And I love that you took a step back and you're like, wait a second. Then you witness your son processing and then coming back, right? And I think that is what we're all missing. Like that sucked. Now what? That sucked. Let's process it. Let's move through it. And then what? Right? So I
Absolutely. Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, well, I was
I'm
gonna just say, like, there's,
pleased.
there's the that sucked piece where it's okay, acknowledging, wow, that really sucked. Man, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, love, that that happened to you. So acknowledging, or even you acknowledging, wow, that really hurt me, right? But it's not going into this like victim spiral, pity
Right.
party spiral. And if you need to, that's fine too. That's all valid. I think where we get stuck is we sit in the suck for far too long where we can't get out. And then we get into these coping mechanisms and behaviors sometimes that aren't going to be the healthiest for us in the long run, right? And so it's the in between of like that victim stage of like, all right, okay, this has sucked. And not even getting into the hero stage or the victor stage of like, all right, I've been through this. Yes, now what? It's the in between, the vulnerability, that
Mm.
vulnerability piece in between to acknowledge where you are at the moment, where like what your feelings are. And many times to move through them super fast, even if you're in a meeting or have to go on stage or what happened, just to validate those emotions by just saying out loud, I am feeling anxious right now. I'm feeling really nervous right now. And that dissipates a lot of that energy already because you're expressing it. You're sharing it. And I have certain tools, of course, that I go through in the book as to how to regulate, how to process through that, kind of like a 2-year-old, really.
Mm. Mhm.
And so then, we're not carrying a lot of that baggage through the day. We're transforming it into other new channels. Maybe it's to serve other people. Maybe it's to share your truth with somebody, with being unapologetic.
Yeah, I love that you talk about that sucked. Let's acknowledge, right? Let's get to the in between. But I also very much hear you say that we're like taking responsibility also. So that sucked. Why did it happen to me? It shouldn't have happened to me, all of that. And you were talking about like your first marriage or some of the loss in your life. And you were like, I'm so like, what a beautiful reframe to be like, I'm so glad that happened to me. Like, not many people can
Mhm.
say that. Like, how can we get people to step into that place, not in a toxic, positivity kind of way, but in a, okay, it happened. And how can I kind of see the light? Because I notice in our community, sometimes, even with friends and family, especially with family who like look at my path sometimes and they're like, what is she doing? Right. Like, I don't know if you can relate.
Oh,
Um,
yes,
but
100%.
yeah, but when you're trying to kind of like walk them through, or when something has happened to you and you're like asking yourself, what's the lesson? And they're kind of looking at you like you got horns. How can we make that okay? How can we, what
Oh
are the
gosh.
steps?
Yeah, so there's a section in my book, how to find the magic in the mess or the magical moments that sucked. And there is an exercise that I have you guys go through. And actually, when you all get a copy of the book from thatsucknowwhat.com, you actually get the accompanying 50-page journal. So it's a digital journal and it's chock full of, it's just a deeper dive into a lot of the concepts that we talk about. But so there's a specific exercise that I have you go through. And by the way, the journal is completely free. And so it's to make a list of all of the things that perhaps was a sucky time. And it perhaps maybe, and I have you start from all the way, elementary school. Maybe you got bullied, maybe you lost a friend, went away, etc. But it's chronicling what happens when that sucky moment happened, and what it gave rise to. Like, what was the next immediate step on that journey for you? So maybe it was your parents got divorced and when you were younger, but then you got to move in with your grandma and she was the best thing that happened to your life, right? Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe you didn't grow up in have the best upbringing, but it taught you, like, what were some of those skills that you learned? And so again, we're finding the magic through that messy time, right? We're finding those magical moments that sucked that actually gave rise to where you are today. And so, and I remember doing this exercise, I mean, a very long time ago, right? Because yeah, when you're going through loss, I mean, everyone has different grieving mechanisms, or even just how to even reconcile with that. And it's very tough to not be in a victim mode, because especially when you're, losing people like I did. I mean, all within a 9-year span. And so if you take all of those milestones and you kind of look and reframe, you can kind of see, oh, I probably wouldn't have been here, huh? If that guy dumped me, or I probably wouldn't have found my now husband if I was still with my ex-husband,
Mhm.
right? And so then we can actually find the gems and the gratitude and the blessings in those times, because it actually led you to where you are. If I didn't get, I don't know, fired from my very, very, very first, dental job, and it was a very tiny stint, I wouldn't have had the courage to then go out and buy my own practice, right?
Mhm.
And learn all of the skills that would then lead me to sell my business and have the courage and bravery to start something completely new without knowing the trajectory, right? If I were so still stuck on that tiny little failure, which many times, you hear like the cheerleader that didn't get into her favorite college, or the high school football player who broke his leg and couldn't play in college, right? But what did those moments give rise to? We can get stuck in that suck, or we can then appreciate the non-linear, the unconventional path that's laid out. And most of us will experience that in our human journey, in our human experience. And that's part and parcel of that.
I love that you walk people through it, because I think we need that, right? To not dwell in that space of suck. It's so important that you're giving us the tools. And I love like how generous of you to offer a journal to the readers, because that's really the way through. Like if we can, you're giving us prompts like elementary school, high school, going back, thinking about the experiences and how they may have worked for us, I think is absolutely incredible. So that's super generous. Tell us again where they can get the book. I just don't want to miss that.
Absolutely. So that sucked, with an ed. Now what? It's all one url.com. And actually, I mean, I know we're heading into the holidays and things like that. So when you actually purchase 3 books, so one for your sister, one for your friend, one for your mom, one for yourself, you actually get 2 additional bonuses. So actually 3 additional bonuses. So one is our self-care 12-month calendar, and that is chock filled with, because we prioritize ourselves last many times.
Yeah.
And so these are just reminders and tips, and it's been used already, and it's loved by our community. So I know your community is really going to love it. But it actually has, month by month, what's a ritual that you can do for your self-care? What's a practice that you can do? And practice meaning a practice for yourself to feel nourished and rested and rejuvenated. And what's a recipe? I'm a big fan of like warm drinks, especially like literally throughout the year, but different kinds of chais. I think I probably was a chai barista in my last life. And so I finally have included a lot of those recipes, and they're kind of influenced from all over the world. And so that, plus a girlfriend's guide to creating your support posse. Because remember, in the beginning, I shared, well, I can't really do it all, but I do it because I'm such a gatherer of humans. And so this is a really big, comprehensive guidebook so that you could actually be that person, that way shower, that leader of your community, to bring people together to actually talk about the times that sucked, and how, and it's not that you're oversharing, it's not that you have to feel weird about it, but there's actually a way, a tact, and charisma that I talk about in this guide, all for free, by the way. And you can get started on it at thatsuckednowwhat.com.
So good. So generous. I so appreciate you sharing all this goodness with our community. I have a couple more questions for you before
Yeah.
we sign off for today. These are questions we ask everyone in our community and on the podcast. And there is this statistic that a girl's self-confidence peaks at age 9. And we always say we are in the business of changing this statistic. And I'm sure you, having a daughter, like you feel like the urgency of us doing work with girls and like really introducing them to all their magic and superpowers from a young age. So I think sometimes it helps when we reflect on our own lives when we were younger. And so I would love to know, what is a message you wish you could give to your 9-year-old self?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I would say be brave. Don't worry about what the world is going to think. You have your own unique path, you have your own gifts. Those gifts might be weird, they might be quirky, they might not fit the traditional mold, and they shouldn't. But you're here to be unapologetic. So stand up and increase your wings, let them be seen, because you're meant for more.
Mm, so good. I needed to hear that. Thank you. That felt good. And final question for today. If you could take a billboard out onto the world, what would it say for all to see?
Oh, wow. Be unapologetic.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Neeta, for being here with us today. Let everybody know where they can find you in social media, wherever you hang out the most.
Yeah, definitely hit me up on Instagram at the Brave Table. At the Brave Table is our podcast. I'm usually there, but Neeta Bushan is my handle for everything. So that's Neeta, B as in boy, HUSHAN. But we would love to hear your brave stories
Yeah.
on the Brave Table as well.
Yes, she's got this amazing podcast. I've been binging on the episodes. You guys need to hear it. So good. And you need to get the book That Sucked Now What. So timely, so timely. I'm so excited to dive into it. And I'm